no need to pipe in, but anybody afraid of bees when they started, and how did they overcome that fear? No?
I just stayed away.
I started with 2 nukes the first year. I really had no mentor, just was going to do it. I didn't know a drone from a worker to nothing. And they come in one box and I transferred it to the 2 hives. You talk about somebody scared, but you just do it. As far as swarms, that didn't bother me after doing those first 2 nukes.
Yeah, I don't think there's too many people in the room that are afraid of bees. Someone said to me when I was getting started, either you'll have bees for a year or 2, or you'll have bees for the rest of your life. If you're afraid of them, you won't be at it for long. And I don't think, I've never been a beekeeper that was afraid of honeybees. And most of the people here have been doing it for a long time, I'm sure. And if you're a newbie, you're probably the same. You'll either have bees for a year or 2, or you'll have them for the rest of your life.
No? Go ahead.
There was a, I was not afraid of bees, generally speaking, but there was one hive, one time, that if they're going to be like that, they can be like that, and I'll let them die over the winter. I didn't care. I was not afraid of bees in general, but that one hive, I wasn't going near.
He left the inner cover and the outer cover out for the winter.
Just by accident, of course. So as a beekeeper, this is something I notice when I'm driving around, I'll see flowering plants and trees, but as a beekeeper, do you become more sensitive or more in tune to nature, the weather, and the environment? Let's start with Jim, way down in the end there.
It definitely has given me more of a sensitivity to the environment, but I've been through so much pesticide over the years that it wakes you up. For instance, I've noticed that, especially this summer, I've never seen a summer where after a rain I did not see angleworms. And I think this summer I've seen 3. Something's happened.
What's an angleworm?
Angleworm or night crawler? Usually after a rain, you see night crawlers crawling on the blacktop in a parking lot or highway or street. I have to walk 2 blocks to get from my house to my honey house, and it's in town. And I think I think I've seen 3 night crawlers or angleworms in that period of time all summer long.
We talked about the lack of diversity of forage for honeybees, and I think those of us who have been doing it for a while can attest to that. Other than the white sweet clover and the yellow sweet clover in the ditches, you hardly see a flowering plant anywhere anymore. The dandelions perhaps, but there used to be a lot more wildflowers and just flowers in nature. And now I don't see that.
I became a lot more aware of the spring weather starting in about the middle of March through July 1st, because that was the most important time for our spring buildup, making divides, putting in packages, and the weather really does make a big difference on what you can and cannot do. By the way, I don't think that angleworms are native to the United States. I'm pretty sure they are. It's a real problem because in our forests, when I was a kid, you would walk and you'd sink down 6-8 inches in a lot of places because the leaves would just pile up and they would slowly decompose. Now, they fall in the fall, by spring, late spring, they're just about all gone, and they've been worked up by the worms.
Yes, I've become more sensitive, but some of that was because I was forced to be. Because every time we took a ride someplace in the car, it was, oh, look at the dandelions, it's only March, my gosh, there's dandelions, isn't that wonderful? And of course, I couldn't see anything about dandelions to get excited about. But I learned about the clovers and all the different, the linden trees, and when this one bloomed and that one bloomed. So I was sort of forced into it, so yes, I am more sensitive to it.
I'd just like to say a little bit about, we are more aware of the environment if you're a beekeeper. And my earlier love, and it still is pheasant hunting. And I don't know, when's the last time you saw a pheasant? And talk about being a native or an immigrant. You know that pheasants are an immigrant and bees are an immigrant. They have everything in common. They need the same environment. I've got a little cap here that says, honeybees forever, habitat. And that's a key, it's a key with honeybees. To have everybody interested in bees, what we should really be interested in is flowers and the environment. We don't need more beekeepers, we need more flowers.
Very good, thank you, Gene. Next question is, what kind of ongoing education do you utilize? What beekeeping journals or books do you read?
I get the American Bee Journal, and I read that. They have a lot of information on there on the mites and how to control them. And I also have some other older books that I look at once in a while.
Nobody else?
No, I read the Bee Journal, and that's about it.
I read both the Bee Journal and the Culture, and I dial stuff up. I'm curious in the internet, even though I'm pretty illiterate with that internet. But I'm always seeking. I'm always willing to spend my time looking at anything new that can happen out there, especially in the bee world or in the environment. They mentioned a couple things that aren't native to the United States. They also mentioned flowers. But the biggest flower that I think used in Europe is the sweet clover. And our government won't let us plant sweet clover in CPR land. I tried, but they told me if I put it in on some of my own land, they would make me plow it up, especially if I get some subsidy from them. So I have issues with anything that's detrimental to our society, whether it's pesticides or it's flowers that they're controlling, especially if they can't give me a good reason behind it. I mentioned I got a 180-pound crop. That was in 1988. At that time, they could put sweet clover in CPR land. You can't now.
You certainly become more aware of rain and sun during the honey flow. I don't know if it was 88 or not, but long about then. I've got some pictures to prove it. I needed a stepladder to get my honey supers to the top of my hive. Never seen anything like it, but it didn't rain a drop for 2 months. It was 100 degrees every day. And the bees are working at the crack of dawn, and they're working, and there's nothing stopping them. On a rainy day, the bees aren't making any honey. On a sunny day, they can make 15 pounds in one day, one hive.
On those years when it's dry for long periods of time like that, the alfalfa, they don't cut it because it doesn't get high enough. And that's really makes a huge difference in the size of the crop around this part of the country.
Ongoing education, I use the internet, I read the American Bee Journal, and whenever possible, I talk to Marla Spivak.
Hey Ed, do you write anything or any articles or something like that?
Me?
Well, yeah, I write articles, but it's not on beekeeping. It's on how to make bee equipment. There's a difference.
Okay.
I don't have to worry about getting stung.
Another question then, please, is how has beekeeping changed from the time that you got into it to now? So if you take a look at when you started versus beekeeping today, what has changed?
The biggest thing that I've noticed is I have a terrible time keeping queens alive. They failed terribly today. And I do not have the total answer. I got a lot of questions myself on that. But I used to keep bees, and when I was keeping bees in mass, I used to replace 20% a year, and every year I had more colonies. Today, if I had 20%, if I replaced only 20% a year, I would be out of business real quick.
During World War II, bee equipment, there were a lot of things you couldn't buy, but bee equipment was one thing that the government said you could buy all you wanted. And so they couldn't get very much sugar, so the farmers all would buy 4, 5 to 10 hives all over in southeastern Minnesota here. And when the war was over and they could get sugar again, the bees were just kind of abandoned. And it became a real problem because they were all full of American foul brood. And it was very hard to keep bees without ending up with American foul brood, because in the spring and in the fall, your bees would be in there robbing out of those hives. And so that's one thing that changed. And the bee inspectors came around and really canvassed the areas. They would go to the post office and find out who's getting bee equipment, or they could legally do that then. They would go to the sheriff's department. Where have you seen bees? I was with the bee inspector, so that's how I know all of this stuff. And they burned a lot of hives. However, here and there would be a hive that, in amongst all of these hives, that didn't have any American foul brood. They were hygienic. We just didn't know that. There was no control for American foul brood other than to burn it. And then in about 1951 or 52, terramycin became available, and that worked really well. I never used it on all the I only used it if I saw signs of foul brood starting in a hive. The spraying was a big problem, especially with the canning companies. The farmers, what they sprayed at that time, they didn't do a lot of spraying for it, in fact, but the canning companies sprayed indiscriminately. And what I would do is in the winter, about January, February, I would go with my maps over all my colonies where my bee yards were. And we would sit down and they would plant the early corn, the early peas around those areas. Or lots of times they late lima beans. And it really helped. I had very little problems after I started doing that, because they didn't want to get out there the information out that they were killing a lot of bees. But there are other people that didn't do that, and they really had a lot of problems.
Well, I can remember when we first got married. Because Denny had been in the service, he didn't have any bees just before then. And so he decided to start up again with his colonies. And so he was going around every place he could find used bee equipment and buying up equipment every which way and making sure that he didn't have any diseases or anything. But that's how he started out. You can't do that now because it's just not possible. There's too much foul brood that's that you can't treat. It'll just take over. I also remember that he used to get packages from down south, and I think we were paying like $5 and $6 a package at that time. A couple dollars for a queen. I remember him ordering queens through the post office, and they'd call us at 3 in the morning and say, "Your bees are here, come get them." And so it was kind of an interesting time. We used to have queens in the house pretty often. You'd hear them piping, and they'd be sitting there waiting for them to get out into the hives. So it has changed a lot over the years.
By the way, those queens would come in what they call it'd be like like a package of bees. There'd probably be a pound of bees in there and maybe 100 to 200 queens. And that's how they ship them. And they seem to just roar a lot when they had all those queens in there. So that really scared